All right, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and we're back for another edition of Sunday Night Astro Live. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for having some patience as we queued everything up for tonight. And I hope everybody's having an absolutely great Mother's Day. And whether you're a mother, an official mother or not, I hope you're enjoying the day and the people that in your life that you have touched and nurtured and loved and uh, cheered on and been there for that they've remembered you as well. It's always interesting when we have these days like Mother's Day or Father's Day, and I think it's cool that for a long time I was like, these are all bullshit. It's all bullshit. These are just Hallmark holidays. It's just and as a kid, I consciously rebelled against them. I would like, and I would even tell my parents, I'm like, I'm not sure why I need to get you like a Mother's Day or this is all, if I really am into you, I'd be into every day, right? Like, thank you, But I don't know. Maybe I was just justifying being a contrarian. But as I've gotten older, it's just people on the other side of the ledger sheet appreciate it, right? There's something about the day that they just appreciate. And we were at HEB today, and we were in line and checking out, and there was a couple ahead of us, but right around maybe our age, thereabouts. And the checker, who's a woman, asked the woman, "Are you a mother?" And she said, "Well, yes, I am." And she said, "Well, happy Mother's Day." Well, what if that woman hadn't been a mother, right? It's like, okay, does that disqualify her from being able to um, celebrate the fact that as a woman, women bring life, right? They just do. It's like, uh, whether it was my mother or Joan or when they leave the space is different, right? There's something about the female energy that is it brings life with it, right? So it was interesting because I thought to myself, well, what's going to happen if they if they ask if Joan is a mother, because Joan is not a biological mother, right? But she does all these other things. She feeds the animals, and she's got she's like fucking Mother Nature, down there in the south of Austin. And yeah, she takes care of her patients and her staff, and so she's not a biological mother, but she has deep maternal instincts, and that shows. So I just said to myself, if she asked me that question, I'm just going to say yes, she is a mother, right? Like, let's just get on the record. Yeah, a mother, no problem. Just go ahead and wish her happy Mother's Day instead of going through, well, not really. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, happy Mother's Day to all of you mothers and non-mothers. And you know what? Sometimes as a dad, you have to be a mother, believe it or not. You got to be a mother sometimes as a dad. You got to be able to, I mean, especially if I've never been a father to a young girl. I have a son, so I don't know what it's like to raise a young girl, but I think you have to have some sensitivity and tap into some maternal instincts if you have a daughter, and even if you have a son, sometimes you got to do that anyways, right? So some of you fathers out there, I'll save it for Happy Father's Day, but you know what I'm saying. You're all mothers. Yeah, it's been a good day. Interesting weekend. We're still here. We're on the grid. We're not off the grid. We haven't been fried, burned. We haven't been torched. The lights are still on. Now we still have another day to go, I think, with this solar storm. But it feels like we're going to be okay, right? It feels like we're going to just embrace the spectacle in some ways. And it was really interesting watching the fervor, right? Watching the fervor and watching the the hype machine, the hype machine on Twitter, right? And I know there's a hype machine on Facebook and a hype machine on Instagram and a hype machine on TikTok. And all these hype machines are like, they're like centrifugal uh wheels, torques, right? One you crank them up, right? And then once you get to a certain point, you just unleash them and they start spinning like crazy. And I'm like, I'm not going to get caught up in this hype machine. I'm not going to get caught up in the hype machine. Now we'll look at it. We're going to get into some of the symbolism around this tonight, and what it could mean, might mean, what it might feel like, both positively, possibly negatively. But I mean, at this point, it just feels like we've had enough doom. We've been on a diet of doom for a really long time. And that's not to say that we can't be aware of what's happening, because we have to be. We have to be aware of what's happening. But there are levels of awareness and levels of being able to respond to something that we have and that we don't have. Like there are some things that are just above our pay grade, right? If something's going to happen, it is going to happen. And you are going to have to respond to what's happening. And hopefully you've had some degree of preparation, whatever that preparation is. Some people are, they're prepped to the max and they have, plenty of, supplies to get them through a fallow time. It's like, yep, I think you should probably do that. Probably better to have it than not. But what other kinds of preparation is there? Like, are you physically prepared to go through a period where things are kind of going sideways or the world isn't operating like with standard operating procedure? Are you physically fit for that? Are you spiritually fit for it? Are you able to deal with the unknown? Are you able to face your fear? Are you able to sense opportunity? I mean, these are all things that are part of these moments that I think lie ahead of us. And there's a lot of different types of preparation that are involved in being able to be in these moments and then navigate these moments. But I feel like we've been so conditioned to expect the worst that in most cases that's how these portents or these phenomena are interpreted. And then once it gets going, it sort of takes on a life of its own. Now that said, there are things that happen that are signs and signifiers, and you should pay attention to those, and we should pay attention to those, and we do pay attention to those. And those things are, I think, paramount to understanding what might happen. And, again, does it help? On some level, yes, the awareness helps. And I've often felt like if we can get out ahead of the curve on some of these things and talk about them and air them out, that we might even alter the trajectory somewhat, right? And we don't even know if we've done that or not, because we're not entirely omniscient. We can't get a 50,000 foot view of reality and then see how our actions or our thoughts or our speech kind of affect other people in what I would call the event canon as a result of airing things out. We don't really know. But it feels like at times like that's an appropriate course of action to take. And I'm all for it, right? Let's air things out. Let's look at it. Let's talk about it. At the end of the day, though, I think that if we're going to, get through a tumultuous time and have any shot of experiencing and inhabiting a new world or new reality, that we're going to have to lean into the version of that reality or the version of the new world being better than this one, right? Like, even if it's 5149, that where things are headed are ultimately going to be better than where we are now. And where we are now is a real mixed bag. And I don't want to spend the next 2 hours talking about where we are now, but it's a very mixed bag. And if we had an opportunity to explore, well, what would it be like to live in a better world or a different world? I think at the end of the day, what it would come down to is just greater conscious awareness. And if we had greater conscious awareness, then the world itself would then evolve into a more, I would say, complex, novel, and loving place. And what do I mean by greater conscious awareness? You just have to be aware of who you are. You have to be aware of your actions and aware of your thoughts, both positively and negatively. And then everybody else has the opportunity to be conscious and aware in their own end. And then the next thing you know, we're treating each other better, right? We're treating each other better. And what's happened is that we've been really put into this like Skinner box where we've been pitted against each other. And, there's room for competition in this world. Don't get me wrong. There's a place for it, right? But what's happened is that the way that the conditions of our world, and in any part of the world, I could take you into Europe, South America, Central America, United States. The goal has been to pit people against one another and to stick as many bodies, right, in the Skinner box, and then see what happens, or who comes. It really feels like whatchamacallit, shit, I'm spacing out on the famous book. It's with Piggy, right? It's with Piggy, and the plane crashes, and anyway, it'll come. But that's what it feels like, right? And we have to stop it. Lord of the Flies, we have to stop it, and it's up to us. We're the ones that get to choose how we interact with other people. We're the ones that get to choose what services or products we want to support. We're the ones that get to choose what we want to do with our time and how we can best use our time, right? Like, it's up to us. We just can't go about being this kind of reactive loop that they've done an incredible job at creating, right? So this is a really important time for humanity. I had an interesting interaction with another astrologer on Twitter last week, and he seems like a nice guy. He seems like this sort of Tibetan, compassionate Buddhist astrologer. So he'll say things that I don't always agree with, and I know I say things that I don't always agree with. He doesn't always agree with, and he said to me, you have Robert, you post some really interesting things on Twitter, even though I don't agree with your politics. And I'm like, that's great. I don't. You don't have to agree with me, and I don't have to agree with you, and we're good. Huzzah, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And there were times, and I got to be honest here, like there were times when that guy had posted something, and it was like I just wanted to fucking slam dunk on it, right? I was like, no, don't slam dunk on this dude. I don't know why, but it's like, just don't slam dunk on this dude. He doesn't really deserve it. He has a kind of a deeper belief in whatever he believes in, and it turned out that we're able to communicate and share a space, have that Pisces Vesica, even though outside of that we're probably pretty different. And this is how I'm choosing to look at the events and the time that we're in, right? because we have all these factions in the world that are at war with each other. I mean, really, if you look at it, we have, I don't even think you could even say that the Palestinians are at war with the Israelis. I feel like it's, more of a boot stomp versus a war. But just for the sake of it, we're going to call it a war. We have whatever is going on in Ukraine, which is, for all intents and purposes, a war. You have what I would call an internecine conflict of asymmetrical proportion and asymmetrical warfare happening in this country with a war on the people in this country. Then you have the greater war in what I would call the West, which I do believe is happening. And then you have, even places like Africa. I mean, there people in Africa are kind of at war with people that want to go in and grab their rare earth minerals. I mean, so there's all these levels of conflict and war that are going on right now. There's war on college campuses, theoretically, across the United States still. So we have a choice, right? We have a choice to interact with people in a way that counters that narrative, right? We always have a choice to counter that narrative. That doesn't mean you sit on your hands and keep your mouth shut. Like, there's a time to talk. There's a time to speak your mind, right? So these are just things that I'm thinking about, especially as we have this phenomena. We're going to get into the color magenta tonight because I think it's a really interesting color. And in fact, the color magenta actually comes out of a war. And it was a war between the French and the Italians. And there is a color that represents this war. And the original color is called fuchsia scene, and it's based on the color fuchsia. And then magenta is sort of the next iteration. And it's not a natural color. Magenta is not a natural color. It comes from outside of the spectral realm, right? So it's a really interesting color just in general. So we're going to get into, and again, I am not a solar flare expert. I don't pretend to be a solar flare expert, right? I feel like that the sun is a component of our consciousness, and that it is connected to us in a way that, and this flies in the face of some other, classical thinkers or whatever that believe the sun is its own entity, and then it informs us. But I feel like the relationship is, at the very least, reciprocal, right? That we are informing the sun and the sun is informing us. I mean, if we're really getting down to brass tacks with everything that's related to astrology and our cosmology, then it's all connected, right? So if we are connected to, theoretically, this idea of Mars in our chart, then Mars theoretically should be connected to us as well, right? Or the moon or Venus or whatever. It's not always a one-way street, in my estimation. How we influence those connections, something to explore, right? But I feel like the primary one, the sun, feels like this feedback loop, right? This feedback loop of consciousness that we're connected to with it. And, will it be the thing that liberates us? Will it be the thing that fires off enough, whatever, photons, sub UV light, whatever we're not picking up on the spectral frequency as it relates to, like, our cells and our blood and our DNA, right? Will it be the arbiter of what's to come and how we're able to move into this next phase of our evolution here? More than likely, right? More than likely. So I just think that it's probably more intriguing and interesting to hold either a neutral space or, at the very least, a slightly positive space about the solar phenomenon. That's just me, because I feel like we need to reset the doom clock and just do better and get better at living with one another and not letting these vampires pit us against one another. All right, let's see what we got here inside of Chataria. Hey, we got my man DJ MC. There's the lovely and talented one, Dr. Jonas. Susie G, happy Mother's Day to all who celebrate. That's right. Esperanza Vencero. Hi, Robert. Amazing mom. My friend's daughter just birthed the Gemini rising sun. All right. Here's to the Gemini rising sun. May you know who you are and who you are. There's my man Ryan, the head of the Introspective Woodworkers Union, the International Introspective Woodworkers. By the way, if you're interested in becoming a member, just go ahead and text Ryan on the down low. He's got the union dues and everything, but you will have to take an introspection test because that's the most important part. If you're not introspective, they do have tests that will determine that. Let's see, who else do we have here? Meow meow. Meow Meow's here. Road Trip 81. Good evening. California Contrarian. Double K. Liddy Lou. Double L. Bill Smith. Hey, Bill Smith. Glemma Spank. Hey, what's happening, Glemma? Let's see. CC Jones, the fantastic one. She's here. Cynthia Cluth. Real Northern Lights make a grinding and creaking sound. I have heard and seen them, and it is stunning. Ooh, I like that. Bill Brockman's here. Hey, Bill. What's happening? Jeff Rosen videos. What's up, JR? Who else we got? Dorian McLean. Yes, you did make it. Robin Dan. Woohoo. You are live in the chat. Robin, you getting any spectral phenomena in the Big Apple there? You seen any return to Magenta? Shirley Loshiava. What's happening, Shirley? There he is. Mark S is in the house. What's going on, brother Mark? CR user. We saw night before SF Bayer, purple then magenta. So we're supposed to get some more tonight. That's what I've heard. At a certain point, what are we going to go to? I think we'll go to about 9 tonight. It's been pretty cloudy and kind of overcast here, but I'm going to go check it out. Let's see. Peter Bayonne, all the way down to Key West. That's right. That's what I think people in Florida were checking it out. Who else is sick from space weather? Scott, I am. Hey, Scott. Do we have any people that are sensitive to space weather in chat? Let's find that out. The Aurora Borealis photos were incredible this week. I know, right? Amazing. Really amazing. Laura E. Too busy for mom today. Down the Wombat Hole. Hey, good morning to y'all down under. It's a great day. Kelly B is here. CR user taking the day off. Husband needs surgery for pancreas. Ooh. Wow. Okay. Well, good luck and Godspeed to your husband. Today was a good day. My son made me a candy wrapper with candy of notes. Okay. I'm not sure what that means, but your son made you something. That's good. Joe, look, hey, thanks, Joe. Look at Joe jumping in there. Hit that like button. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see. It was okay. So he got creative. It was awesome. He's creative mind and artwork. Cool. Good deal. All right. There's my man T. Jordan. Tomas Jordan. Ursula Hauser. Checking in from Prescott, Arizona. What's happening, Ursula? Good to see you. Aaron L. Evangeline G. from Asheville. What's going on? Misbehaving too. There he is. Door at the door. My man Steve. Yes. There you go. we appreciate you, and your husband is going to fly. He's going to fly right through this operation procedure. Tondar's here. I'm one bad mother. Like, shut your mouth. Let's see. Fran's a doggy mom now. Hey, doggy moms count. It's important to have a good doggy mom around. I regret not having kids, to be honest. I just, that would be a tough one. That would be a tough one, I think. And I hope you make peace with it. And there's always somebody else's child or grandchild or somebody who could use that feminine touch and the ability to, nurture and love and support. So, don't sleep on it is what I'm saying. But that would be a tough one. And, I think that there, might be men out there that, might say, hey, I wish I could have had a kid too. Right. But that would be challenging. But your days of look, hey, Kamala Harris hasn't had kids. And now she's the mamala. So you never know. You never know. God, that was ridiculous. All right. Happy we have boys. There you go. Let's see who else we have. Claire is here. Hey, Claire. Peter brings up, I felt I was more nurturing to my son than my ex. Makes not, Peter, look, dude, I can relate to that. 100%. 100%. And my father was, he was kind of a weird blend of, being really hard. Like he was, he could be really hard on me. And he was also at times nurturing and supportive in a way that my mother wasn't actually. My mother was working all the time. And my father had Mercury and Cancer, so he was a really good listener. And I felt like that was one of the keys to him being nurturing as well. But Peter, I can totally relate to that from my own experience as a father. Charlie's here. What's up, Charlie? Don't regret having kids. Trust me. Let's see what else we have here. It's like being asked if you voted. Technically, never have, but I did not. But I did vote not to believe the JFK, RFK, MLK, 9/11 BS. I'm with you, Robin. CR user says, we are all getting an energetic upgrade from the big star in the sky. Look, I'm all in. I'm all in on the positive side of this. I'm just all in on the positive side. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Blue Lotus is here. What's happening, Blue Tondar? Speaking of fathers, man, I have diapers and a malfunctioning lawnmower to manage. Ain't got no time for harp. I love it. Scott's lost 20 pounds of the doom diet. Keep going, Scott. Keep going. Let's see. Unfortunately, the hype isn't totally off. We wouldn't have gotten such. I agree. No, the hype that I'm talking about, it was the doom hype. Just the doom hype. That's all I'm talking about. No, the hype. So yeah. The energy, the alerts of what was incoming, I'd say pretty factual, actually. Let's see. Cynthia says, I'm not sure that this spacecraft is naturally orchestrated. I do know I've been feeling very physically strange for the last couple of months. Interesting. Some people say it was HARP induced. That's what I've heard. I don't know. whatever. Let's see. What else we got? Any new people? Any newbies showing up? Oh, let's see. Secret Law 2007. Only 9 late. Happy Mother's Day. Much love. Hi, Susie G's got a little cult following, I think, in chat. I've been watching that. I think she's got a little cult following. Pretty sure she's going to spin off at some point and take her people to Fiji. That's what I think. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Scott says we are the deciders. I agree with that. Aaron had to read Lord of the Flies. Everybody did, I think. Brand's been having a low-grade headache for several days. Anybody else? Is this weather affecting anybody else? Sinus issues? Grace Gravity. Hi, Grace Gravity. What's happening? Patricia, just being me. Yes, it is challenging, but work on being a neutral observer while the drama plays out. I think that that's probably a good tack. So again, I've talked about this before. The goal is individuation, right? The goal is that you can access whatever part of you need to access at any given time, whether it's logic or humor or grief or laughter or sorrow or pathos or logic or reason or higher logic or higher reason, lateral thinking, right? Like all of this is part of the human spectrum, right? It's all part of it. And the goal is to be able to access the whole of it, the total of it, so that you can use any of these qualities or any of these attributes that at your disposal. And so if you have to be rational, logical, you can. If you have to be more intuitive or blending, you can, right? And some people are going to gravitate towards maybe one modality more than the other. But at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about individuation, and that you're capable of hitting all the notes in your human experience. And then the healing is the part that allows you to untangle the things that keep you from being able to access all those things, whatever it is, right? We've all gone through a lot of it. Some of us are still going through it, right? It's the untangling, which makes it easier for you to be present and say, okay, well, I can have a contrary opinion about that. When I have a contrary opinion about it, I can state it clearly and calmly, and I don't have to get angry or upset or shake my fist at that person because I've worked through my anger, right? Or I could be justifiably and righteously angry when I see something that is absolutely and completely inhumane, right? I think that that's a viable response to a given situation. Like, how could you not look at what's happening in the Middle East and not have some degree of righteous anger and condemnation? So the whole idea is for individuation is to be able to tap into any of it at any time. And it doesn't make you perfect, but what it does is that it allows you, even in those states, whatever state that is, that you can always readjust where you are. That's the beautiful thing about it. You say, well, you know what? I may have to reassess my approach with this. And somebody who is not individuated does not reassess their approach. They just keep saying, well, this is truth, and this is what I believe. And maybe it's true, and maybe that is true. Maybe you do have to stand with that. But sometimes you go, you know what? I didn't really think about it that way. Let me reassess where I am. Anyway, it's all about individuation. That's just me. Let's see. Peace over Twitter beef. Yeah, no, it was good. It was good. Now, not that this guy and I are best buddies or whatever, but we have, you know, a I don't know, a certain amount of respect for one another, and that's fine. That's fine. My headache resolved, improving from crazy upper respiratory. So Bo going through a little bit of physical distress here. Upgrade and process Secret Soul Service or Soul Secret Service Triple S. Molly has War 2. Oh yeah, it's been going on for a while, hasn't it? Let's see. I want to see Robert and this guy named Das Goravani, born this, and of course, if he's not a basket case of ailments by now. I'm not a huge fan of Vedic astrology, but that's cool. Let's see. Naomi Wolf interviewed Cliff High. Oh my god. You know what's amazing about Cliff High? Like, if I look, and I've been following Cliff High for a very long time. I've been following Cliff High since like the early 2000s. Cliff High has had, how do I say this and be respectful at the same time? Cliff High has had more moments with his sort of public career and prognostications that with other people might have absolutely torpedoed their status. I'm just saying, Cliff has an amazing way of kind of reinventing himself and landing on his feet and then having like a whole new kind of wave of people that are into Cliff world. It's fascinating to watch. I'll just leave it there. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Sue is here. What's up, Sue? T-Mobile Magenta. That's funny. Let's see. What else do we have here? I wore a dress this color as a bridesmaid for my sister. French and Italian shouldn't fight. They should cook and make love. Hear, hear. I agree with that. Does an electric sun flare? That's a really interesting question. Really interesting question. It may not flare, but maybe it might. It might what? Crackle. It might arc. How about that? Maybe an electric sun arcs. Quite possible. Let's see what else we have. Artist Seer is here. What's up, Artist Seer? Barbara Boots. Barbara is responding positively to the positive. Hope Quantum of Conscious is here. Matt. Is that guy's name Matt? He's funny. He kind of a rip job on Terrence Howard. That's kind of, it was interesting. Hey, Harriet. Hey. All right. I think we're all present and accounted for. Oh, Sue's got a little thing here. Anyone react poorly mentally to solar flare? I felt my mind crack in half and felt like I was completely decompensating. Feeling better today, but it was concerning. Anyway, I'm wondering if people who are born under the sign of Taurus or if you're a Taurus rising, that maybe this particular experience with our sun might have impacted you a bit more. Question mark. Elizabeth Donnell is here. Secret Law 2007 as well. What's up, E? Good to see you. Let's see. Anybody else? Tina Pacino. Hi, Tina. Olivia Provorst. She's sick. Okay, we got some sensitives here. They saw it down in Puerto Rico. Wow. Nora Rashid, the Queen of Speed, has been celebrated apparently for Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day, Nora. Laurel Jubin, we got another mother in the house. What's happening, Laurel? Taurus. Taurus mama. Let's see. My Uber driver earlier today is a PhD, is a professor, and drives Uber to earn more. Wow. That is crazy. That is really crazy. Derek Reagan Walls. I'd love kids. All right. Anybody out there that wants kids? Here's your Jedi right there. Let's see. Who else do we have here? There are tons of Uber drivers who don't speak English, but this one had a PhD in literature. You know, I was in, okay, we're going to get into the astrology here. I was in one of those car service things in New York. Before they had Uber in New York, they had taxis and they had car service. And that's how you rolled in New York pretty much, or you had a gypsy taxi. And I had this car service guy one time, and this dude was freaking FOB. I mean, he could barely speak English, and he didn't even know New York. And I think this was really kind of at the beginning of GPS stuff. So he was having a conversation. I could hear it. He was having a conversation with the dispatcher in, it was either Cantonese or Mandarin, I don't know what, telling him where to go. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I got to catch a plane and I got this guy. Okay. I'm just going to let go here. We are just going to let go and see where it happens. We'll see what all right. Okay. Where are we? All right, just some business before I crack open our chart of the moment here and we get into some other stuff. I have a locals page now. And so this is the really cool thing. I scrapped the other version of the 11th house. And so people were contributing paid membership. And I was doing about one webinar a month, which was good, right? So we've got all this content here on YouTube and, you know, the various other channels, plus the monthly webinar that I was doing. And I broke up with PayPal, so I had to redo everything. And now I have a locals page. And as of now, 42 of you have signed up. So thank you for doing that. And there's a link in the show notes that can take you to the locals page. And essentially what it is, it's going to be our online community. And I will be doing one webinar a month. And that's to TBD, right? It's either going to be like what I did last week with Jupiter and Gemini for the members, or I've been wanting to work with people to be able to go back and, you know, look at certain areas of your life when you grew up, and you can see where the transits were when a certain point in time where an event was happening, which I think can be very helpful, you know, in understanding some of these transits at a particular age. You go, oh shit, well, no wonder I was going through that, right? And I can, you know, so, you know, some of it is just like basic mechanics of astrology. Some of it be more specific about like what's going on, you know, with, you know, where things are headed. Or it could be more of a big picture kind of thing where it'd be closer to what I talk about here on YouTube. The other thing that we have done from time to time is have like a digital town square. And that's where people just show up and talk. And we can talk about whatever's going on. And that could be politically, personally, spiritually, metaphysically, whatever, right? Like everything is on the table. And then, you know, we just have an opportunity to communicate. And then the other thing that I want to do is like an event pop-up. And what I mean by that is, let's say something was happening like out in the world that was interesting, and we wanted to talk about it. Well, now that I've got everybody's email baked into locals, I could just say, "Hey, at 6 p.m., we're all gonna get together and we're gonna talk about X, whatever X is." And then, if we need to, we can go live on. Well, we wouldn't go live, but I could bring in like a live stream from some other place or a news source, right? It would be a way for us to look at something happening in real time and then discuss it and talk about it and trade notes on it. We did this back in 2020 with the election. And I thought it was a really interesting experience because I think we were all on, it might have been YouTube. And we were looking at this live, I think it was Steve Bannon, and the guy that he had as his political prognosticator. So we're watching the results come in real time in 2020, and it was a really great opportunity for all of us to talk about what was going on and sort of bounce things off of one another. And I'll never forget the feeling I had, and it was around 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock at night, and you could tell certain things were starting to go off the rails. And it was like, uh-oh, something is up here. Something is weird. And then I think we might have shut down at about 1 a.m. And I went to bed that night really uneasy. And I woke up the next day, and it was all hell had broken loose. And what I was feeling the night before is you could just tell there were certain things like the power had gone out in, what was it, Georgia? Like, how the fuck does the power go out on election night, right? Like, it was just weird. So anyway, it was a cool thing to be able to look at that in real time. Locals will allow us to do that, right? So it's like a pop up. So if something is interesting, bang, we'll put it out there, we'll show up, and we can just kind of riff on it, share information, almost like a bit of a phone tree in some ways. But instead of, making sure everybody else is okay, we're sort of talking about like what's happening in real time. So those are the three uses that I see with locals, and the sort of the value add that you get and you will get. And then I'll probably post some written content there as well. So anyway, there's a link there. It is $11 a month for the 11th house. $1 goes to Stripe and processing, and the rest goes into your support for the show and the content, which I thank you a great deal for. All right. So we got the locals thing, we got the like thing, we got the subscribe thing, and then we have my buddy Chris at truehempscience.com. And I have to get just a push in there for him because he is the official sponsor of the show. And if you go to truehempscience.com and check out all of their hemp products, which are all organically sourced, and you type in 15MINS, 15MINS, you will get a free goodie bag if you spend $100 or more. So it's like a bonus to your order. $150 or more gets you free shipping, and there's always a money back guarantee within the first 30 days. You can even contact Chris, and he'll be able to answer all of your questions regarding CBD. Just go to the website, make an appointment, and he'll help you out there. Next week on the Friday Farcast, I'll be interviewing David Sereda. Some of you may know who he is. Kind of an interesting fellow. And so that'll be happening next Friday. And then what I'm really looking forward to, not that I'm not looking forward to David, right? So that'll be it'll be this Friday, this coming Friday. The following Friday, I'm going to have Miriam Heinem on the show. And she has come out with a documentary on George Floyd. And she has gone into like the vault and got FOIA requests for all this material with Floyd, and she's working on the George Floyd book to end all George Floyd books. So she's going to be on the show in 2 weeks on the 4th anniversary of George Floyd. You won't want to miss that show. So part of what we do here, is that you get this content, and you get every Friday I do my best to bring you an interview with somebody that's interesting. We've got Astro Weather Tuesday through Thursday, and 15 minutes of flame. So when you're a member, you're getting all the content that you'll get from locals, but you're also in a lot of ways subsidizing this content as well. And I thank you for that. You can also be a client, and I do personal readings. So there you go. Business at hand, taken care of. Okay. Where do we start? All right, let's just get some of the doom out of the way. Let's get a little doom out of the way. So I was looking into, first of all, let's look into Magenta, because I think it's really interesting. The history of Magenta, right? Like the color. And it really is connected to this war, which is fascinating. And let me see if I can find it here. It's right here. Yeah, it's right here. So there's actually a battle that is connected to the word magenta. All right, so let me just bring this up here. So this is where it all begins, right? 1859. And again, you go back to that period of time, and roughly from 1847 to the 1860, mid 1860s, like the world is just completely turning, right? You have the Great Migrations, 1847, 1848. You have the gold rush of 1849. We've gone into this from the so-called Tartarian perspective, when I think it's around 1851, where Uranus and Pluto both change signs at the same time. They go from Taurus to Aries simultaneously, right? No, it's Pisces to Aries, and no, it's Pisces. It's Uranus and Pluto going from no, it's Aries to Taurus. That's what it is. It's Aries to Taurus. My bad. Aries to Taurus. And then we get into this whole kind of new world, right? This whole new world post 1851 dominated by the sign of Taurus. All right, let's get into this. The color magenta was the result of the industrial chemistry revolution of the mid-19th century, which began with the invention by William Perkin of mauveine, which was the first synthetic aniline dye. The enormous commercial success of the dye and the new color it produced, mauve, inspired other chemists in Europe to develop new colors made from aniline dyes. In France, Francois Emmanuel Vergine, I believe, the director of the chemical factory of Louis Raffard near Lyon, tried many different formulae before finally, in late 1858, early 59, mixing aniline with carbon tetrachloride, producing a reddish purple dye, which he called fuchsine or fuchsine for fuchsia, after the color of the flower of the fuchsia plant. He quit the Rafford factory and took his color to a firm of paint manufacturers, Francique and Joseph Renard, who began to manufacture the dye in 1859. In the same year, two British chemists, Edward Chambers Nicholson and George Mall, working at the laboratory of the paint manufacturer George Simpson, located in Walworth, South London, made another aniline dye with a similar red-purple color, which they began to manufacture in 1860 under the name rosine or rosine. In 1860, they changed the name of the color to magenta in honor of the Battle of Magenta, fought by the armies of France and Sardinia against the Austrians. Okay, so it was against the Austrians at Magenta Lombardy the year before, and the color became a commercial success. So I guess all you need is a war to launch your new color. Started in 1935, the family of quinacridone dyes was developed. These colors ranging from red to violet. So nowadays, a quinacridone dye is often used for magenta. Various tones of magenta, light, bright, brilliant, vivid, rich, or deep, may have been formulated by varying amounts of white to the quinacridone. Quinacridone. I don't know why I said alone. Quinacridone artist paints. Another dye used for magenta is lithol Rubin BK. One of its uses is as food coloring. So the color itself originates right around 1856, and it becomes popularized by the Battle of Magenta, which was fought on June 4, 1859, near the town of Magenta in the kingdom of Lombardy, Venetia. So it doesn't last very long. It's like from the 1st of June to the 3rd of June, over and done. I guess if you're going to have a war, let's get it over with, right? So there's another really interesting cultural reference for this, besides the birth of magenta. And it has to do with whatchamacallit. It is the give me 1 second here. The Reserve Bank of India issued magenta banknotes. Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft. So H.P. Lovecraft. Now this would have been, okay, if we were talking about magenta as a color before the eclipse, this would have been some really good doom. So H.P. Lovecraft wrote a story called The Color of Space. And it's about this meteor that crashes in this area of New England. And what happens is that this meteor, when it's chipped, begins to emit this very unusual color. And the effects of the color and the light spectrum from this meteor begin to change everything in the area. So, for instance, the vegetables that are grown in this area are enormous, right? Like they're larger than any other vegetables people have seen. But when they go to eat them, they taste like foul. They taste horrible. And then people start to mutate under the color of this light. And what Lovecraft is exploring is this idea of an alien presence that is disembodied and that it doesn't have a shape or a form, but it does have a color. And there was a movie that was based on it, and it was released, I believe, in 2020. And the name of the movie is called Color Out of Space. And if you had loaded up on this prior to the, see if I can get it in here, hold on. If you loaded up on this prior to what happened over the last couple of days and put this thing on Twitter or TikTok, or Instagram, you would have been the king or queen of doom. So this is some of the artwork for The Color of Space. And they had decided that, because in the Lovecraft, apparently, I've never read the Lovecraft short story, but I kind of went through a synopsis, and they never really talked about the color. They just mentioned this, kind of unearthly color. And in this movie from 2020, starring Nicolas Cage, they chose magenta, right? So this is kind of a negative. This is kind of a negative vibe on magenta. And, for people out there who are still hungry for some doom, I just thought I'd give you a three-course plate of it right here. And this just seems like the type of movie that Nicolas Cage would be in, doesn't it? It's kind of like weird and culty, and maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't. Like, I don't really think he cares. I think he likes to work. I think he likes weird material, weird content, and I think he likes to pay his bills. So there you go. Color Out of Space, based on the H.P. Lovecraft story about a meteor that falls to Earth, and then once it's chipped, it begins to emit this unearthly color and has an effect on the people and the environment around it. And in this case, it's not that positive. Just saying. Just saying. And it's kind of weird too, right? Because we're experiencing this color sort of in space, right? So who knows? If you start seeing enormous vegetables in your garden, beware. Beware. Another reference culturally to magenta is kind of not a very well-known album by one of my favorite artists of all time. And his name is Willie DeVille, but he was known by his band name as Mink DeVille. And his second record was called Return to Magenta. And he's a New York guy, and you can see like the New York skyline here as a kind of, I don't know, about as 1970s as it can get, with a magenta hue in the background. And the album itself is okay. His first record is better. But he was an amazing artist. Like, I used to go see him when he came to town. The guy was fucking awesome. But just another cultural reference point with magenta and Return to Magenta. The other thing that I thought was interesting, I'd been thinking about this, and Grace on North Astrology had come up with the same thought around this that as I did right around the same time. And it has to do with the 29th degree of Pisces, which is where Neptune is. And the Sabian symbol for the 29th degree of Pisces is really interesting. And it has to do with kind of where we are in a lot of ways. And even, we could even look at maybe what's going on with the sky as some kind of version of this. So let me throw this up here. And I've always felt like this really captured that 29th degree of Pisces. So this is the Sabian symbol. Light breaking into many colors through a prism. Keynote, the analytical power of the mind necessary for the formulation of life processes in their many aspects. So, of course, this is from Dark Side of the Moon. And I thought that this was a really appropriate symbol for this symbol. So this is what Rudyard has to say. Cycles of existence begin in unity and end in what I have called multi-unity. At the stage of consummation, the many individual differences are totaled. They constitute a sum. Within that sum, a unified total. The inevitability of the future processes of differentiation is implied because every cycle leaves a mass waste of products, slowly returning to the unconscious state of chemical matter, of humus. What the symbol tells us is that unity will always break again into multiplicity. The prism is always there. There is no absolute unity. If anything could be called absolute, it is the relationship to the one and the many. This fourth stage symbol of the concluding fivefold sequence of phases points to the fundamental type of operation in all modes of existence. The most beautiful and seemingly everlasting experience of unity will in time be superseded by the need to attend to a multiplicity of details. Existence implies differentiation. So, what's interesting is that I think that Rudyard is essentially talking about the zodiac, and that this bandwidth of light, like this spectrum of light, this unity, which is like theoretically all signs into one, which is what Pisces is. Pisces is all sign. Pisces is the recipient of every single sign in the zodiac, which is why it can be very difficult for Pisces to be in the world, because they're channeling all the other 11 signs plus whatever configuration of their own they have. That's why I think it's really difficult to be a Pisces. Although when they're on, they can. I was talking about individuation, right? Like the idea of individuation is kind of what I'm talking about here, right? This is the many and this is the one. This is the spectrum of frequency that you can tap into at any single level. And this is the source that it comes from. And I actually think that even though we're only dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bands of light that come out of this single light spectrum, I think that in a lot of ways, what Rudyard is referring to is the zodiac itself, or the multiplicity, or the multi-unity that the zodiac represents, right? That every single aspect or every single sign is part of this greater spectrum, right? But it's also part of what comes out of it. And then ultimately, when you return to Pisces, it becomes part of it again. So there's this unity, multi-unity, unity, multi-unity, unity, multi-unity. It's part of this cycle. And I think it's fascinating to think about, like, kind of where Neptune is right now and where we are, where we are on the spectrum of like our consciousness. And I don't think I've ever lived during a time where the bandwidth of all these various um, types of expression have been more present in the world. Like whatever you think of it, right? Whatever you think of these various types of expression, like maybe that's a furry or a fuzzy, or or maybe this is somebody who is I don't know, radically identitarian, whatever given race, right? Or this person here just completely identifies, with the earth and nothing else but the earth, and they're just a tiny little speck or aspect. You know what I'm talking about? Then you have, over here you might have, chads, or all these. There's all these different kind of modes of being and expression right now. whether they're positive or negative, right? They're all kind of out there in a way that, quite frankly, I've never seen before. It's not like, we had, I don't know, it's not like it was just strawberry chocolate and vanilla ice cream for a long time. We lived in a pretty eclectic world. And especially if you grew up in California, you saw a lot of shit, right? But now it just seems so widespread. And we're living with all these. I mean, and again, some of this I think is ridiculous, like having, 56 different genders. It's a little overkill, right? But we're kind of in this interesting spectrum of all these different, uh, I don't know, particulate parts of the whole, right? But what we kind of know and understand is that at some point, all of these will merge back into the one again. So it's not like we're, we're stuck anywhere here on the light spectrum. That there's this cycle, and that if for all these variant hues, right? I mean, you can even look at, like, it seems like every other month, the gay pride flag has some new fucking color to it. It's like, okay, enough. Like, they just keep adding on, right? But at a certain point, even that returns to this singular spectra, and then it comes back again, right? So we may be here in this process at 29 Pisces, and we're seeing the gradation of all these, various types of human experience, for lack of a better term. But at a certain point, it goes back into unity again. And, so the question would be, well, when is that? When does it return to unity? Astrologically, we could look at Neptune and Saturn conjuncting in Aries, although that might be a bit of a forced unity. It could be the end of Pluto in Pisces, and then we go to Pluto in Aries, and we're back into that kind of unified spectrum. So that would be basically 3 Pluto cycles away, which are roughly, what about 15 years? So 45 years from now, like in the big picture, big astrological picture, where everything starts over again. Pluto and Aries, right? Where the multi-gradient uh, hues that are shot through the prism go back to that singular spectrum, right? And there's always been this idea that at a certain point, through all this experience, whatever this experience is, and it's always interesting to look at this idea of experience, because we thought, okay, well, we have the historical record, and we can see these waves and cycles of, wars and civilizations, sort of like a sine wave, right? And then we get into, like, the lost worlds, and the hidden architecture, and all the questions that come up with sort of this alternative history, that people like John Levi and Ben the Alchemist and Michelle Gibson and all these people have, spent a lot of time digging into, right? And then that throws everything sort of, into a different categorization. But even with those potential cycles, epochs, eras, and the hidden history, at the end of the day, the same concept still applies. That we would at some point graduate from the one to the many, and then back to the one. But when we would return to the one, it would be with an awareness of being theoretically separate, but not separate, right? Like it would be kind of a very interesting um, amalgamation. And, we'll use the word individuation again, like a cosmic individuation, like returning to the one or going back to the garden, whatever the garden is or was, or going back to that primordial consciousness that was undifferentiated, and that we would bring with us, the entire cyclical history and story, whether it's, the Encyclopedia Britannica version, or whether it's sort of the lost historical version or variation of the two, that at a certain point, we would return to source. And we would return to source from a different place, right? It would be through experience. And that I think that ultimately, um, this Sabian symbol really speaks to, where we are now. And even an event like what's happening with the so-called sun, right? It shoots out this spectra of ultraviolet light and cosmic rays and gamma rays and, all the other things that are unseen to our eyes. And then it comes back to us and it's interpreted in a variety of different ways, right? And everybody has their own sort of version of, what it is or what could happen or what might happen and what we're going through. So I think even that is kind of interesting, and that even this symbol represents the multi-unity of the experience. And some people may be experiencing it differently than others. Somebody could be in chat right now saying, man, last 48 hours, I've been ecstatic, right? Another person in chat could say, man, the last 48 hours, I've been really struggling physically, right? So there's all of these bands and bandwidth of the spectra that we can experience. And not one of them is theoretically the totality of the story. They're all part of this greater unity, this greater spectrum of light that gets shot through and becomes prismatic, and that at a certain point returns to the singular unity, right? This singular unity, this one beam, this one point of light, and then it goes back again. And then, so this is a much bigger cycle for where we are, but it's fascinating. And what's going to happen is that in 2025, we're going to have Saturn and Neptune at this degree, right? This is 2025 is going to be, when we get into the Saturn Neptune conjunction from 2025 on for 3 years with Saturn, like it is going to be a complete mindfuck. There's going to be so much going on during that time. And some of it, this is my hunch and projection. Some of it will be very heavy-handed. Very, very heavy-handed. Because when you deal with Saturn in Aries, it's in its detriment. And Aries wants to do what? It wants to express its will. Right? That's what Aries wants to do. And what does Saturn do? It sits on top of Aries, and it's like a gravitational field, intense gravitational field. It's kind of like that new ad by Apple, right? Where you guys know what I'm talking about. You have all these beautiful things that the individual uses to express itself. And it's all from the last 100 years, roughly. And then what happens? This thing comes in and just crushes it, right? And compresses it. And then it, oh, here it is. It's all in the new iPad. How lovely. We've just taken all of those beautiful things for a period of time. I mean, visually, it's disturbing. And Apple has had a lot of blowback for this commercial, right? And we just compressed it and put it into basically a black cube. But to me, that would be very symbolic of Saturn and Aries, in the expression of the individual. Well, let me try this. Let me try this. Let me try this. Let me try this. And then, here comes the crusher. So it's a fascinating symbol, right? Now, that's how Saturn in Aries operates. And if you have Saturn in Aries in your chart, that's a challenging assignment because you're always being told no. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Get down. Go to bed. Whatever, right? Like Saturn and Aries got to be the most frustrating fucking Saturn position in the zodiac. Period. End of story. Maybe Saturn in Cancer, a close second, but Saturn in Aries is rough, really rough. You're always being told no. So the idea is that you would learn through discipline, structure, and order how to channel your will, right? Like how to channel your will. Like, well, why don't you go join the army? They'll teach you how to do that. They'll teach you how to channel your will. They'll teach you self-discipline. And maybe that's true. Maybe somebody that has Saturn and Aries might need to just go into the belly of the beast and say, okay, you're Saturn. I'm going to learn from it. Here we go. But not everybody's going to do that. So that's your precursor. Saturn and Aries, very difficult, challenging assignment. And then I believe we had Saturn and Aries in the early 2000s. That's when we went to war with Iraq and Afghanistan. It was, it was a shitty time to be, really upfront about the whole thing. Let me see. Let me go back. We had Saturn. Saturn was in Gemini in 2001. Okay, so it had gone through. So Saturn comes into Aries. I think it's the end of the 90s. So that's the Balkans. That's when we're in the Balkans. That's when we're basically, going to war there, even though we're supposedly not going to war there. And it's a precursor for what happens after that. So Saturn in Aries is that late 90s period. Now then you throw Neptune in on top of that. And Neptune in Aries is, to me, Neptune in Aries feels like really messianic. Like Aries is like one person. Like it's the self, right? It's the self. And Neptune in Aries feels very messianic when you deal with Neptune and you deal with this kind of spiritual, Piscean, fluid, inspirational, delusional, fictional, creative, imaginal energy, which is what Neptune brings to the table. And it's like, oh, okay. This is setting the stage for some degree of fanaticism. And maybe the fanaticism of one individual. And then you throw Saturn in there to combine it with Neptune. And it's like, oh, somebody's rising to power during that Saturn Neptune conjunction. Somebody is rising to power. And if there was ever a time that the Antichrist would make itself known, it would be during that Saturn Neptune conjunction in transit. That would be the time. And if not the Antichrist, there would be theoretically enough people, sort of vying for the title and the role, right? It just feels like, people that are itching to step up and lead people into a messianic age. That's what it feels like. At least for 3 years. And then everything shifts. But those 3 years are very intense. But at the same time, the solvent of Neptune also breaks up the form of Saturn and Aries. So for a lot of you people who have Saturn and Aries, and you're going through your second Saturn return, this Neptune transit is going to be kind of mind blowing for you. And I think at the end of the day, very liberating, very liberating. And everything that you've had to do, put on the back burner, you know, getting in the corner of the room, you know, children are seen, not whatever it is, right? This Neptune transit coming up with your second Saturn return, although Neptune's a bit slower, is going to be really interesting. And eventually it will catch up to everybody that has Saturn in Aries. But you first wave people of Saturn in Aries, basically like the first 10 degrees. You're the ones that are gonna get that Neptune conjunction when you're going through your Saturn return. One can even make a case that as Saturn moves through the conjunction with Neptune, that even people that are born, let's say at 11, 12, all the way through 29 Aries, your Saturn return will be colored by the Neptune transit through Neptune, so that by the time it gets to you for your Saturn return, you're already experiencing what other people have, right? Like the Saturn Neptune could be right here together. And then there's this kind of multi-unity experience with everybody that has Saturn and Neptune as a result of this. So it's going to be a very interesting time, because I do see this like singular rise to power. And at the same time, right, like there are people who are going to be, I don't like to use the word empowered. It's not really the right word, but there are people that are going to be enlightened, uplifted, and they'll have a very different experience than other people. So it's really going to come down to this interesting dichotomy of people who want to be led and are looking for a strong leader in order to lead them and almost be like a charismatic messianic figure, and other people who want nothing to do with it and are experiencing the effects of the Neptune Saturn conjunction in a very liberating way, and kind of understanding something about their own divinity and their own and again, I hate to use the word spiritual understanding because it's just kind of common, but I'll just use the word their own divinity, like their own um, higher being, right? And it's going to be a really interesting time because Uranus and Gemini is kicking in simultaneously. So it's almost like we have these parallel worlds that are happening. And we may have more than just parallel worlds, and again, we get into this multi-unity model here. And you could have pocket universes or pocket societies or pocket worlds. But I think if there were two defining models of the paradigm, it would be one model as being like intensely top down and kind of driven by a very powerful individual, or an individual who has assumed power. And then on the other side would be a more kind of collective version of it, where people have nothing to do with that and are not interested in that at all, and are experiencing their own, for lack of a better term, personal enlightenment. So we'll have these very interesting versions of the world going on, and they may not be entirely compatible, especially if the one group believes that the other group is heretical, and that they are not living within the religious or the spiritual uh, codes and bylaws and strictures of whatever is being set up during that time. So it'll be a very interesting time. And I'm not sure it's going to be entirely easy. by the way. But, from what we've learned about the universe, it feels like there's always an offset. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, we were talking for a while about the red heifer. I think they may have slaughtered the red heifer. But while the red heifer gets slaughtered, we have this white buffalo calf, which is born. Now, the white buffalo calves have been showing up since around 1988. And I think there may have been about 50 of them born since 1988. So it's not like they're, oh my God, here we go. It's the prophecy, but they're not that common. There are a lot of buffalo calves that are born, and only a small percentage of them are white. But it's more like the timing of it that I found to be really interesting. So we have the red heifer thing, and then we have the white buffalo calf thing. So to me, the universe provides interesting offsets. So while this top-down thing is happening with Saturn and Neptune and what I would call the rise of a messianic figure, on the other side, you got a bunch of people that are figuring out who they are. And this is where we come into this kind of clash of ideas or even a clash of consciousness in a lot of ways. So I think those 3 years, from 2025 through the end of 2028, and we moved into 2029, critical, crucial, really crucial. And the reason why it's crucial is because we're coming out of this Saturn-Neptune conjunction at this 29th degree, right? At this 29th degree, and we have light breaking into many colors through a prism keynote. That's the keynote. Now, when you look at the next degree in the Sabian symbols, which is like 0 Aries, it's supposedly Pisces 30, but it's really 0 Aries. It takes on a very Aries-like figure where it's about a boy who, here, let me just, instead of paraphrasing, I'll just read it for you. Okay. So Pisces 30, a majestic rock formation resembling a face. So the face in the rock formation is very Aries-like, right? It's like the head. Idealized by a boy who takes it as his ideal of greatness, and as he grows up, begins to look like it. So that is like on the other side of this 29th degree of Pisces. And I think that has some really interesting interpretations and repercussions. So from the process of creation, right? The process of creation, basically you take on what you ideate. That's what happens. Like if that's what your head and your mind is focused towards, that is ultimately what you become, which is an interesting concept because now we're taking into account this idea of the will, which is nascent, and this idea of the head, which represents Aries. So on the other side of that, since we're dealing with this kind of Neptunian thing too, right? It's kind of like you could see, let's say, whoever this historical figure might be that emerges. And I do think we're going to see somebody emerge as like a very messianic figure. This would also apply to them, right? So let's say, for instance, as a young boy, they were into, I don't know, Julius Caesar, right? And so Caesar became their model. Or as a young boy, they were very into Napoleon or whatever, right? So that's them taking on the visage and the power of the thing that they have ideated. So we have, again, sort of two interpretations of that symbol, right? Like, we have the opportunity to become something that, if we spend enough time focusing on it, and I don't like to use the word idealize. I'll use the word ideating on it. We become the thing. So let's say, for instance, and I know some of you are not religious, but we'll just use this as an example. We'll use a couple of examples. So let's say, for instance, you ideate this idea of Christ and whatever, everything that theoretically Christ embodies, and without the Bible baggage. But let's just say that that's what you ideate. Well, this is what this process is about, and that you would begin to take that on. Or let's say you're all about compassion, and you're all about the Buddha, right? And so this is what this would, you know, this would be the process. You would begin to take the qualities and the conditions of that thing that you were ideating, you would take it on and you would become it. And so some people say, well, those are all just false images, right? So why don't you just work with a blank slate and not have anything? Well, sure, why not? Right. So what basically what that degree represents is that it just happens to be a rock formation because it is visceral, right? And it represents the head, and it represents Aries. But it has a lot to do with this idea of ideation and putting your energy into that thing that inspires you. So that's where we're headed on the other side of this. On the other side of this 29th degree of Neptune and Pisces. And again, if somebody who's grown up and has ideated a historical figure, then, there you go. That's what they become. And that's who we might see emerge during this period of time. So we're in a really interesting phase and cycle because of the end degree of Neptune in Aries, and I'm sorry, Pisces, and how it all flips, right? It all just flips at the end of 2025. And we're in this new cycle, and it's a very intense cycle. It's a very intense cycle. And again, it's characterized by the rise to power and a very strong top-down control grid infused with this kind of Neptunian ideal of whatever kind of religion or mindset or model emerges at that time. So I'll give you an example. All right. Let's say it's a version of the World Economic Forum, right? And everything inside of the World Economic Forum is about communitarianism. And so this idea of communitarianism would be the spiritual backbone and the spine of an individual, and I will say an individual who would be the carrier for that kind of concept and that kind of paradigm. Like, there'd be one person who would be like the flag bearer for that, right? So that's just kind of one prevailing sort of mode of consciousness. Another prevailing mode of consciousness would be, more along the lines of what I've talked about before, which is this weird kind of Christian theocracy. And I could totally see this with Neptune and Saturn in Aries. And I keep talking about Mike Johnson, right? Mike Johnson astrologically is kind of poised for something like this because he has, if I'm not mistaken, he's got Mars and Aries, right? So he's got that Aries kind of drive. Mike Johnson is really driven. He's very driven. So he has Mars and Aries, and he's an Aquarian. So he's always going to flip that. So he's going to flip that script. Like, you think he's conservative. Oh, we got this great conservative guy from Louisiana. And And then all of a sudden, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Whose side are you on? Right? I mean, this is what he's become in a lot of ways. And he doesn't care. Like Mike Johnson doesn't care. Mars and Aries, he's just gonna keep going. Like that's his modus operandi. But I could see somebody like Mike Johnson emerge during a time like this. My prediction is that the election is contested. And as a result, the Supreme Court's involved, the military's involved. What do you call me? The military's involved, and that there is a time where there is no president. And because, by the way, Biden is leaking gas. Like I've been watching. Here, let me get out of this graphic. I've been watching what's going on with Biden over the last week, and his campaign and Biden in general is just leaking fuel. He was on, I think, MSNBC. I think it might have been MSNBC. I know it was CNN. It was that Aaron woman, I think. I don't know what she's on. Anyway, she's asking Biden all these questions. First of all, I don't know why his handlers are letting him get on a show like that. Even if it's somebody playing him, which is a possibility. He looked dumbfounded. He looked like the village idiot. He's whatever sort of, well, he's genteel and he's like Grandpa Joe, and he'll take you out for ice cream and he'll put you on his lap and he'll smell your hair and sniff it, and he'll tell you that you remind him of the first girl that he ever kissed when he was in grade school. That's kind of like how people have viewed Joe Biden, this kind of benign, doddering, anti-Trump figure. And then they just look the other way because they know that somebody else is pulling all the levers, but they don't have to deal with Trump. But I'm telling you, this thing with Biden's really, really leaking fuel. Last week, I saw Eric Holder. Now, where the fuck they found Eric Holder, I don't know. I haven't seen Eric Holder on national media at least since Obama was in office. So Obama left in 2016. And even when Eric Holder was the attorney general, he was not somebody that had a lot of camera time. You'd see him every now and then. He'd make an appearance, and then he'd just go back out and start prosecuting baseball players for steroids. And Lance Armstrong and whoever else. But there he is. So here's Eric Holder, and he's capping on the Biden campaign. And he's capping on Biden, and he's capping on Hunter, and he's basically saying, hey, look, at a certain point, you got to start thinking about your legacy. And not only your legacy, but the legacy of the party. Like, whoa. They're bringing Eric Holder out for this? Like, by the way, I haven't seen Obama in about a month. I don't know where Obama's been. Maybe some of you have seen him. But I haven't seen Obama or Michelle in about a month. A lot of people will say, well, yeah, they're dead now. Who knows? Maybe they are. I don't know. Right? All I know is he has been radio silent. And maybe some of it has to do with the Israel-Palestine stuff. Like, he doesn't want to get his goose cooked, right? He doesn't want to be, have his ass hanging out in the wind and supporting all the students and their right to protest, just like he did back in all pre, like from 2009 to 2016. He never told people to lighten up and it's America. We got to care for other Americans, and any wanton and undue violence towards other Americans won't be tolerated. You never heard that out of his mouth. It basically is like, yeah, just go ahead and protest. You've got a right. You've got a right to do what you're doing. He's basically saying you've got a right to burn it down. And that's exactly where it all started. He just poured kerosene on the fire. And it really, the fire hasn't really been put out since then. But we don't see him out there now. We haven't seen him at all. So there's no Obama, there's no Michelle. I haven't seen Michelle, but I did see Eric Holder. So what's going on with this whole Biden campaign? I mean, this is just we're just into May, and we've got this election in November, and this guy's leaking gas in a big way. I don't know what they're going to do, because everything that I'm seeing is completely negative around Biden. Now, what's interesting is that nobody else in his administration, maybe with the exception of Mayorkas, is getting any heat. But again, this leads up to the election, and you have Trump, who is trying to put out all these legal fires, has his own issues. You've got Biden, who's just completely leaking fuel, and then you got Kennedy, who has become just prime meme real estate with the whole worm thing, and you have an election. And what the hell is going to happen here? I think it is going to be contested. Jupiter will be retrograde on the night of the election. Mercury goes retrograde later that month in Sagittarius, and it goes retrograde exactly opposite Jupiter. So you have Jupiter in detriment, Mercury in detriment, and they're both retrograding. How about that? Good luck sorting through the legality of that transit. Good luck. Right? It's going to be very difficult. And if I'm not mistaken, Mars is in Cancer retrograde during that time. It just feels to me like does anybody really think that Trump is going to just flat out win, and the media is going to play along, the Democrats are going to play along, and then here we go. It's just all going to be kumbaya. Does anybody really think that? Like, it might happen, and maybe it's just all about the demoralization of the left again. Who knows? I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. Do people think that Biden, who's leaking fuel right now, is just going to run the table, and that they're going to now? Remember, it's all a uniparty, so in some ways it really doesn't matter, right? But I think what does matter is conflict and more strife and more division and chaos. Because when you have conflict, strife, division, and chaos, you can reset the table. So let's just say Leaky Joe makes it all the way to the election. And he and Trump and Kennedy and Jill Stein and whatever his name is, Cornel West, Marianne Williamson, they all have their little election party. And if somehow Leaky Joe wins, how do you think the right is going to feel? Or Trump Nation or they're going to lose their fucking minds. They're going to lose their minds. And I think there's clear enough evidence that the 2020 election was altered significantly. And that's still in the back of people's brains. So there's that. And you got a whole crew of people who would be extremely upset if that happened again. And then on the Leaky Joe side, right, if somehow, Orange Man Bad gets elected, clearly you could see the activation of, Antifa and all of these other groups who would be anti-Trump. And by the way, those would be the anti-Israel faction as well, because Trump is on the record that he's 100% pro-Israel, right? So all of this is floating around in the air. I just don't see a peaceful resolution to the election. And I think this is the last election of this type that we'll see, because it's Pluto and Capricorn, and it's the end of that system, right? So moving on, Pluto and Aquarius, it's a whole different ballgame. Did I freeze yet? Let me see if I've frozen yet. No, I'm still here. Good. Still talking. Okay. So that's where I think the Mike Johnson piece comes into play. Because every time I see something now that has to do with Israel, Palestine, Gaza, like it's all Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson goes to Colombia. Mike Johnson speaks here. Mike Johnson speaks here. It's like Mike Johnson just may as well be fucking president right now. I'm serious. That's how this guy is being positioned. They're already positioning him as president. He's got, with the exception of about 15 or 20 Republicans, he has massive bipartisan support. A lot of people are thinking, oh, Hakeem Jeffries, he'll supplant. No, first of all, they'd have to get him out. And he doesn't have enough support. Well, I'm sorry. He has enough support. The Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Matt Gaetzes, the Chip Roys, they don't have the support. Mike Johnson's not going anywhere. A lot of people think that he's being, blackmailed. I don't think he's being blackmailed at all. I think he's a willing participant in all of this. I think he's taken $700,000 aggregate. It could be more. It's what I've been able to find through APAC and their super PACs. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of, hey, yeah, I'll do that for you. No problem. Oh, it's Peaches. Hi, Peaches. Come on up. So I think that's where all this is headed, right? And this goes into this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which kicks in 2025. And one person. So maybe it's Trump. Maybe Trump's that guy. Maybe Trump sneaks in and he becomes the Julius Caesar that he probably should have been in his first term. Maybe it's Trump. But my instincts say it's Mike Johnson, that this thing is being set up for a Mike Johnson presidency. One of the things that's interesting about Johnson is that he is not a supporter of the Constitution, which that may shock some people. He is a firm believer that we should have a constitutional convention to rewrite the Constitution. This is Mike Johnson. Remember, he's an Aquarian, so that's a revolutionary idea, right? That is a revolutionary idea. And I would assume that they already have their new constitutional talking points ready to go. So anyway, that's just kind of a stream of consciousness in sort of a how do I say this? A pattern of where we're headed, right? And that is sort of the worst case scenario. And as I mentioned before, on the other side of that, is what I would call the spiritualization of the individual, which will be in kind of a counter position with Saturn in Aries, Neptune in Aries, right? So these two different models. One where it's like there's this one charismatic or messianic individual who's on top, and then everything flows from them. And then the other model is that there are all these people that are here, but their consciousness is moving in this direction, right? So you have them moving in this direction, and then this individual, and they're moving in this direction. So it's a really interesting sort of energetic dynamic, right? And really, if we're talking about people, it's not just this direction, it's kind of omni directional, right? But we're talking about elevating, our perspective and elevating our point of view and elevating our thoughts and elevating our communication, right? And refining, who we are, whatever color or stripe we are. That is a process that has to do, and I'm not going to use the word ascension because I'm not an ascension guy, but it's a process that has to do with ascendancy, right? Because if we're looking, I'll go back here, and I think the pyramid is a really good symbol. So if we're right here, right? So if we're right, so if we're right here, right, this is where we're headed. This is where we're headed. Right here. This is that process. We're headed to the top of the pyramid. And then theoretically, which would be very much along the lines of like, Pharaoh at the top of the pyramid and then ruling downwards. So we got some fun ahead of us. We've got this Mars cycle that starts in Leo, retrogrades to Cancer, and then goes back into Leo again. That's about a 5.5 month cycle, start at the end of the year. An interesting one, obviously. But there you go. Just some perception, speculation, meditations on where things are going energetically, astrologically. And just remember, right, when you look around and you see certain things that are ugly, cruel, unjust, that's not the totality of the story. And it doesn't mean that you should turn away from them, although sometimes they're very hard to look at. But I think that you have to also take into account that this thing that we're living in is kind of living, breathing. Some people call it a matrix. I'm not so sure I want to use that term, but we have this living, breathing relationship with creation. And that as we become more conscious and aware, we become more conscious and aware of our relationship to it, and it becomes more conscious and aware of its relationship to us. And so, as that's happening, right, as these other things are happening, the offsets are happening as well. So we're in this really interesting time, right, where the for lack of a better term, the novelty and the novelty and the travesty are competing for our attention. And I don't think the two are completely indistinct. But at the same time, novelty is the better place to be than travesty. All right. Why don't we get into the chart of the moment? Let's do that. We'll look at some specific astrological stuff. By the way, do you know who I think is a really underrated group? Musical group? the Spinners. I think the Spinners are kind of amazing. You go back and listen to songs in their catalog. Oh my God, they're amazing. Love the Spinners. Okay, oops, let's do this. Games people play night all day, and they just can't stop it to keep me running through. Okay. All right, let's get into now, right now. Where are we now? Where are we now, Peaches? Okay, here we are. Sun 22, Taurus. Third decan, Capricorn decan. Sneaking up on Uranus. Tomorrow we're going to have a Sun Uranus conjunction. That'll be interesting. Pretty cool that we had the moon in Cancer on Mother's Day. It's a nice fit for Mother's Day, isn't it? Earlier in the day, it was trining Saturn and, just kind of loading up on the respect for mothers and the women who bring life to our lives. I'm not sure Peachy would have made a good mother. I'm not sure about that. Peachy, I'm not so sure. Although you do take care of Jasper. So tomorrow, Sun Uranus conjunction. Wow. It's not like we haven't had one before. I mean, last year when we had Uranus in Taurus, we had the Sun in Taurus as well. But Jupiter wasn't there and it wasn't on Algol. So what day are we really looking at here? Maybe midpoint, Tuesday. So Jupiter's almost at 27. Let's go Wednesday, because I think at Wednesday, the Sun will be right in this midpoint with Jupiter and Uranus. You know what's really fascinating here is the position with Algol and fixed star Algol. And it just feels like I'm just thinking that it's liberating. It feels liberating to me. Like people want to take off the noose. They want to because Algol is all about, the fixed star Algol. It's the Medusa star. It's connected to beheadings and lynchings and injuries to the throat area. It's at 20. It's at 26. It's right on there. It's a 26 Taurus. And it's the Medusa star. So the whole idea is if you have, let's say, Mercury around, I don't know, between 23 and 28 Taurus, like part of what you're trying to do is to find your voice in this world, to be able to find your voice. So, I would recommend that you sing, that you chant. Maybe if you feel so inclined, do a public speaking class, right? The whole idea is to unlock the throat. Now, the other thing with Algol is we get the word alcohol from Algol. And with alcohol, you drink too much. What happens? You lose your head. So the idea is with Algol to theoretically attach the body and the head, that they are part of the same organism. That's the whole idea with Algol, right? That you're not up in your head all the time, or you're just, body oriented, and you just, are kind of a slave to the body, right? Or a slave to the senses. and that your brain or your head is like not engaged. So the idea is to bring the two of them back together. Would you stop clawing my shoe? I bought her these scratch trees tonight. They look like cactuses. And I'm hoping that she'll find them intriguing enough to. I'm going to put them in a couple different rooms. I thought the cactus effect might be interesting. Anyway, so here we are, and let's look at this. Let's say you don't have to be a Taurus. Let's just look at this as sort of this symbolic joining of the forces, and that the whole idea is to be integrated, right? To have your head and your body intact. And not only that, but with Jupiter and Uranus, the potential for something much larger to come into your awareness is also there. So this goes back when we were talking about the sun, right? Because we did have all of this solar activity with the sun in Taurus. And one of the things that, again, I'm sure a lot of you were already there. One of the things that I was like, okay, we just went through a long wind up with the eclipse and all the doom around the eclipse. And we're already experiencing some of the eclipse effects, which I talked about. But do we really want to have another, scoop of doom, like a triple scoop of doom? I'm like, okay, enough. Let's just flip the script. Let's change our position on this and let's embrace this no matter what it is. If it's energy, our job is to convert energy. Energy is energy. That's our job. We're here to convert it. So to me, this was very Uranian in terms of how we were going to deal with this whole idea of the sun, that we're going to honor it, right? There's the science. We're theoretically, as long as they're not fucking with HARP, we're seeing the manifestation of this thing. And we are interpreting it and working with it in ways that are theoretically meaningful to us. And maybe that's on a physical and visceral level that's connected to the body, or maybe it's the body and the mind. Maybe it's more of this holistic experience of whatever it is we're experiencing and integrating it in some ways. And for some people, it was taking beautiful pictures. For some people, it was looking at this thing and being awe-inspired, like, wow, look at this. It's incredible. And for other people, they're still sorting through it. I wonder what the Sabian symbol for 2021 Taurus is. I haven't looked at this, but that's the degree. So we're in about 20 degrees, 19, 20 degrees. Because that's where the eclipse was happening. So let's go back to Friday night. So it'll be 20 degrees. Okay, let's look at here. Let's do this. Let's look at 19 and 20 Taurus. Let's do that. Let's do this. I can just go from one. There it is right there. Okay. Come on, you can do it. Am I frozen? I might be frozen. Let me see. Am I frozen? No, I'm not frozen. All right, here we go. All right, we got it. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. So 19 Taurus, which is where would it, let's see. So we're 22. So last night was 21, and then Friday night was 1920. So Taurus 19, a new continent rising out of the ocean, the surge of new potentiality after the crisis. I think that's interesting, right? So we're looking at potentiality after some mode of crisis. The symbol need hardly be commented upon. When the mind has been emptied and light has been called upon to purify the consciousness freed from its attachment and contaminations, a new release of life can emerge out of the infinite ocean of potentiality, the virgin space. Now, that's interesting that Rudyard would use space as it relates to the ocean. What will it be used for? Because this is a fourth stage symbol, we we find in it a suggestion of how to approach whatever new phase of life has been not only hoped for, but actually confirmed. The technique is simply to allow the infinite potential to operate in unconstrained spontaneity. This means to have reached a state in which the conscious rational ego is no longer a controlling factor. This is a really interesting symbol for 19 Taurus, which is what was happening with the sun on Friday night. Or I'm sorry, well, the sun had theoretically triggered this, but we were experiencing it on at night on Friday, right? So it's kind of like shelve your preconceived notions and allow this thing to not only color your imagination, but give you a sense of possibility. Something new is emerging. And then Taurus 20 is very cool, right? Wisps of wing like clouds streaming across the sky. Well, it's not quite Aurora Borealis in terms of its uh, imagery, but it has this kind of atmospheric ethereality associated with this image. So the keynote here is the awareness of spiritual forces at work. Any emergence of life potentialities from the depth of the vast unconscious is answered by the spiritual activity of superconscious forces in a cosmic kind of antiphony. The individual who has taken a new step in their evolution should look for the signature of divine powers, confirming their progress. It may reveal the meaning of what is to come next. The wing like clouds may also symbolize the presence of celestial beings, devas, angels, blessing and subtly revealing the direction to take, the direction of the wind of destiny. This fifth stage of the 10th fivefold sequence, it concludes a process. Having experienced what the individual should find themselves more securely established in their own original nature, receiving the blessings of supernatural forces. That is pretty cool, right? So we're going from a new continent rising out of the ocean, the surge of new potentiality after the crisis, the ocean of potentiality, the virgin space. And here is the awareness of spiritual forces at work. So I feel like this is these, I mean, if we're dealing with the symbols of the degrees of the sun through the theoretical transmission, this is the message right here. This is the message. And the new continent rising out of the ocean is this new body of awareness that is arising out of the ocean of consciousness. All right, let's go back to our chart here, shall we? I can't get that spinner song out of my head now. Games people play. Is that it? No. Who's this? Oh, that's Israel. We'll save them for last. Let's see. Where was I? Just had it here. Keep me loving you. I just had this thing. All right, hold on. Let me go back. Here we go. Get back on it. Oh no. No. Okay, here we go. All right. So here's where we are. Yeah, this is the big story right here. I think it's really interesting that a lot of times, as an astrologer or people who are very interested in astrology, know a little bit about it, they'll look at these signs that tend to have what I would call like great spiritual import. Like let's say I don't know Sagittarius, which is big picture, overarching, ninth house, upper room, higher mind. Like that's where the galactic center is, and that's where the mind of God is, and man, that's where the big stuff happens in Sagittarius. Or Pisces, right? Oh, Pisces, this unity, this oneness, this consciousness. When there's things happen in Pisces, it's a major deal, right? Or people think about those kinds of signs, or Aquarius, because they tend to be um collective in their import and nature. But you wouldn't really think about Taurus as being a sign that is a massive activator. You wouldn't really, as an astrologer, I wouldn't necessarily think of Taurus in that way. But I think that that's kind of what we're looking at, because fundamentally we are all Taurian, right? We're all made of the elements of the earth, which is what Taurus, even though it's ruled by Venus, it's what it represents, right? It is the land, it is the material, it is the resources. It really is the feminine in a lot of ways, right? So we tend to think of Taurus in those kinds of terms, which tend to be more materialistic and maybe not as sexy as Pluto and Aquarius, and everything is going to just kind of flip, and we'll be living in you know fifth dimensional consciousness, and and we'll take anti-grav cars to get there, right? I mean, the people have these kinds of ideas of the outer planets and the outer signs, but I don't think they would really think about that, and I'm one of them. I would think along those lines, but it's looking a lot like where we are right now is really important. Like this is fundamentally important and a big part of our story with Sun, Jupiter, and Uranus right there, right? So we're in the midst of, because if we're going to experience any kind of reasonable long-term change to our psyches and our consciousness, it's going to have to come through our bodies. And that's what Taurus is. That we would literally have to embody it versus it being some kind of, grand design or overarching galactic system, or with Aquarius, like the collective gnosis of all these different individual nodes all being lit up simultaneously. And I think both of those things are true. But I think it's like we're in fundamental territory here. Don't sleep on the moment. Don't wait for Uranus to go into Gemini and move into a sextile with Pluto. And then all of a sudden, everything just gets lit up and goes electric. And we have pocket universes and pocket societies. No, the one thing about the Aries and Taurus, what do they teach us about? Now, they teach us about right now. It's happening right now. And just, keep your eyes open Tuesday, Wednesday, when the sun hits that midpoint right between Uranus and Jupiter and is the mediating factor between opportunity and expansion and novelty. And then right behind everything, you've got Venus. Like Venus is picking up speed here. And Venus is going to be a part of the story as well. Maybe not as quickly. And here we've got Mercury roughly sitting 3 degrees off the Taurus party. So at some point here, again, we go out to Thursday, we'll have Jupiter, Uranus, Sun, Venus, Mercury, all in Taurus. That's a lot of beef. Somebody's telling you, where's the beef? It's right here. Right. This week is really about being in the body. It's about being in your body. I think some tremendous things can happen. Imagine being like really grounded, super grounded, and super elevated, and having your consciousness and your higher mind be like next level, but not at the expense of being in your body. Isn't that how it's supposed to be? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to root this thing here. And if not now, then when? So why not take advantage of it? We're not, because we won't have this amalgamation of planets in Taurus again like this. Next year we'll have Uranus in Taurus, but Jupiter won't be here. Who knows where Venus will be? So this is kind of a unique time. Don't sleep on it. I wouldn't sleep on it. And the beautiful thing that's happening here, besides the conjunctions, is at least with Saturn and Neptune, right? The Taurus planets are they're in kind of a synergy with them. And when we deal with Pisces, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with the spirit. And when we're dealing with Taurus, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with the body. So the body and the spirit are in harmony with one another. They're not in disharmony. Now, the moon will move into Leo, and at least initially, it won't be that much of an issue. But I would say by maybe Tuesday, and the moon moves into Leo and starts squaring off against a lot of these Taurus planets. This sort of peaceful time of reverie might be challenged a little bit, but it won't necessarily be bad, right? I think if anything, that Leo moon goes into a bit of a kind of an ego check moment, and then it slides into Virgo, and that's going to be really interesting too, because now we have the moon in trine with all these Taurus planets. So now we have embodiment with a purpose. Now we have embodiment with meaning. And you'll say, well, what does that mean? Well, that's up to you. And you need, and the moment will arise. Like there's theoretically, there's a meaning in every moment, or there's an opportunity for you to have meaning in that moment, whatever that is. It's up to you. right? This again is about the bandwidth, right? It's the individuation, and you're choosing to say, hey, I want to be a part of the moment, I want to help, or I want to serve, or or I'll just be me. It'll unfold the way it needs to unfold. So these are really interesting energies. And not that, like I always talk about what's going on in the world, because I think it's interesting. And, I think whatever we call or pass off as culture is interesting to some degree. But I will say this, that if you were to take this time over the next 24 hours, or even when the moon goes into Virgo and starts, trying it off against all these Taurus planets, if you were to just take this time and to just be by yourself or on your own, or just tuning the world out if you needed to or wanted to, like, it'd be a really good time. It'd be a really good time to do that if you needed to do that or wanted to do that. Because we're not going to have this energy like this again. Like, we're going to have to wait for an entire Uranian cycle, 74 years, for this energy to come back around again. So I don't want to, I don't want us to miss this moment. It's a good moment. It's a really good moment. Like, you can affirm, and it's so funny, right? Because everybody kind of wants to get to the fifth dimension or the sixth dimension or leave their bodies. And, don't get me wrong, right? I would mind zooming out of my body and cruising around the cosmos, coming back and whatever, right? That said, though, we're in these bodies, whether you think it's a dream or a hologram or matrix or whatever, you have a body, you're in it. And this is the embodiment of that experience. It's the embodiment of the experience. So this is a really interesting time. So claim your place here. And claim your place here. You're not, for now, you're not going anywhere else. Claim your place and see what's available and on the table. It's an interesting time. I wouldn't think that Taurus would be a sign that would, give us insight into the new way or the new path or the new modality of expression. But it makes sense, because when I think of Taurus, I think of it as being like maybe the most dense of the astrological signs, because it's so connected to materiality. And yet what's going on here is what I would call like transmaterial in a lot of ways. And remember, it's the body and the spirit. So this is a really interesting time. And by degree, Jupiter is now moving into trine with Pluto. And by degree, that sun is going to start to move into trine with Pluto as well. So we have this interesting alchemical effect with air and earth and Aquarius and Taurus, and how we're able to, usually when we have those things going on, they're in square with each other. And so there's this dynamic tension and friction that takes place. But because of the degree of Pluto, this slow movement with these Taurus planets, it's going to be different, right? It is an effortless alchemy in a lot of ways. And so the efforts of the individual, or not even the efforts of the individual, it's just the realization of the individual. It's just this idea of mindfulness and who you are has an effect on the whole and the collective. I hate to use the word collective. It just seems so fucking, I don't know, like Trotskyite or something like that. But these are interesting days, and we have this interesting phenomena around us, and we have these Sabian symbols that are lined up in a really interesting accord. So take a breath, right? Get your feet on the ground out there at a certain point, and be here now. You're on this realm. You're in this world, and there are more possibilities that are available and imaginable if you can just sit back and allow this awareness to interpenetrate who you are. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 5 to 6 days. And out there, nothing may change. But in you, something may fundamentally change. And if the fundamental change is that you feel more solid and grounded and connected, and at the same time, more aware and feeling as if a greater intelligence is at the periphery of your consciousness, then that's what it's all about, right? That's what this is about. So let the games begin and see where you can take it. All right. Life would be complete without a little doom. So let's go here. No, it's not it. Here. Yes. All right. So some people have been asking me about Israel. And let's go over their chart. So May 14th. So we're 2 days away from the recognition of Israeli statehood. So Israel is about to have its solar return. It is the 76th year, if I'm not mistaken. 76th year. So I'm sure there'll be some sort of celebration and ballyhoo, and there will be clearly a high degree of awareness and information to that end, right? You'll hear about it in the media is what I'm saying. And there's Uranus coming in right here in conjuncting with Israel's sun, which is at 24 degrees. And the 24 degrees, the 24th degree in the Sabian symbols is quite a violent degree, right? Because we get to 23 and then 40, you read for 24. So I'm going to read you the Sabian symbol for 24 degrees, which is the degree of Israel. An Indian warrior riding fiercely, human scalps hanging from his belt. The aggressiveness of human instincts when fighting for their earthly base of operation. I'm sorry, you can't make this shit up. Okay, that is the Sabian symbol for Israel. An Indian warrior riding fiercely, human scalps hanging from his belt. The aggressiveness of human instincts when fighting for their earthly base of operation. In the mythology of early America, the Indian represents the savage, close to the nature, led by primordial instincts. Alas, our present century has revealed that under far less imperative circumstances, so-called civilized man is capable of far more cruel tortures and extermination. This symbol, related to a fourth stage, seems to imply that violence and aggressiveness are basic components of human nature at the level of the emotions and of a deep-seated identification with a particular culture, which insists on regarding men of other cultures as potential enemies. What is being confirmed here is the value of a group of men's differences from other groups, we are still in the period of differentiation, act one of the cyclic process. And the need for differentiation of human behavior and collective values is still very strong. At the emotional level, man apparently still has to believe in violence for survival. I cannot think of perhaps a more apt symbol than that. I can't. And I'm not being uh, anti Semitic. You just look at Israel, and there is a great deal of violence there, right? The aggressiveness of human instincts when fighting for their earthly base of operation. That's it. That's it. That's the keynote, right? That's what we're seeing. Now, you can make a value based judgment on that, no doubt. What's interesting here is that the symbol, is like, well, what human scalps? Are they other Indians? Are they Wasichus? Doesn't really say. We just know that there are other humans. So Uranus is conjuncting the Israeli sun. And that is, I wouldn't say it's problematic, but it's kind of problematic. And I'll tell you why. Because Uranus happens in reverse, right? I mean, that's the whole idea with Uranus, is that the thing that you set out to do, if there's a strong Uranian aspect or transit, is that it doesn't turn out the way that you started out to do it. Because with Uranus and Aquarius, we have this strange inversion that takes place. I don't think it is a great harbinger for Israel to have Uranus on its sun. Now, there could be a couple of different outcomes to this. Number one is that there has been talk that the UN is going to come up with a rapid statehood for Palestine, and that they're going to table it and put it on the UN floor. Now, that'll be very interesting to see what happens, because the United States has the great veto power. And the pressure would be put on the United States and Joe Biden and whoever is the envoy to the UN. So the United States could do three things. They could abstain from voting, which, by the way, is almost as powerful as a vote for statehood, because they're not using the massive veto power that they're invested in. I don't know if all veto power is the same with the UN. I know that some countries have more power than others. Benin does not have the same veto power as the United States or China or Russia. But what would happen if somebody inside the Biden administration said, hey, look, if you want to win this election, you need to have your person at the UN vote for this. If that would happen, that would be the Uranian upheaval to everything. That would be the Uranian upheaval. Now, supposedly Palestine was offered statehood once before through Yasser Arafat. Arafat was another toady, just like whoever is running Hamas is another toady. Arafat was a toady. Now, whether or not Arafat was in the back pocket of the Zionists and the Israelis in the United States, I don't know. Maybe he said, no, instead of a two-state solution, we just want it all back. And, you guys can go the fuck back to wherever you came from. I don't know if that's why Arafat said no. But here we are, right? We're creeping back up, and where's Jupiter headed? Jupiter's headed into Gemini, where it's like 2, right? And Jupiter is going to be moving right there, right into Israel's 8th house, going to hit its vertex, going to hit Ceres, going to hit Mercury. So maybe this whole two-state thing is, going to come through the UN, and the United States either abstains or votes for it. In which case, if you're Israel, now what do you do? Now you've got theoretically the world basically saying, hey, look, it's time to chop this thing up and give them their space. And they've already gone this far down the path, and they've eliminated X amount of human lives and destroyed all this infrastructure. Do you think that they're just going to stop and say, yeah, you're right. You're right. We need to give them their own state. No, they're not going to do that. So then what happens? Now they're going to feel cornered and completely cut off. And that's when things get, really sketchy. And Uranus could work even more here. I was looking at this tonight. And I was looking at this South Node Chiron wide conjunction in Scorpio. And when I see that, and I see that South Node in Scorpio, I just think, okay, well, this is a group of people who understands occult operations, right? That's what Scorpio is all about. They understand occult operations. They understand magic, right? They, whether it's, the Kabbalah or the, I don't know, the Zohar or whatever, right? Like this is a group of people who understand magic, dark, light, whatever, right? Magic. Chiron conjunct the South Node, to me, says that if you're going to use that magic, there is going to be a price to pay for using that magic. So the whole idea here with Taurus is to, shovel in the ground, material values. And in true node in the 7th house, the idea is to be fair. That's what the true node is over there. You're supposed to be fair. You're supposed to have agreement and concord. And say, okay, well, you have this, I'll have that, right? I mean, that's the true node in Taurus. 7th house. You get your share, I get mine. But back here, there's something else going on, right? This is, I think, the manipulation of dark magic. And I'm not sure how far I want to go with this, but the idea is that the appropriate expression, nodal expression, would be fairness, which is represented by the 7th house in Libra. And even Libra rising would be about striking a fair deal. Let's be fair about it. This is yours. This is ours. This is yours. This is ours. And that's really what they're supposed to be doing over here. But this South Node in Chiron in Scorpio is like, you're right. You're running off the fumes and the patterns, and the spirit. I wouldn't call it spiritual. I would call it the dark magical understanding of the past. And I think there's a price to pay for that. What is it doing? It's squaring all these Leo planets, squaring Saturn, squaring Mars. I think that there's some other things going on there. Like when you get into Mars and Leo conjunct Regulus, there's this idea of sort of divine rule, divine right. Like, God gave us, the right and the energy and the what's the word I'm looking for? The right and the energy and the permission to go forth and make this happen, right? Like that's Mars and Leo conjunct Regulus. But there's like a reality check here with Chiron. And if you theoretically do it to a point where you're kind of flattening everybody else based on your own sort of divine right to manifest destiny, there's a price to pay. Now, the Mars square sun is indicative of a fighter. Like, these people are fighters. Go watch the what's the Exodus. Go watch Paul Newman in Exodus. You'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. Right? Anytime you get into a Mars sun square, fighters, right? Fixed, forget it. They will fight to the death. They will fight to the last person. I guarantee you that. But there's a price to pay. There is a price to pay with that square with Chiron. And sometimes if there's an overreach with the conflict and this kind of divine right, that Chiron is going to kick in and it's going to be, it's going to damage the overall process of what I would call will, collective or group will. And, there's an unshakable sense with Mars trine Jupiter and Jupiter conjunct the galactic center, right? They're like, this is our destiny and we are unstoppable in the approach of our destiny. It's you can just see it. It's in this chart, but there is a price to pay, and it's this Chiron square. And I think things are going to get very intense and interesting with Uranus and what's going to happen over the next even year, right? Because Uranus goes retrograde and it comes back again. So this is a longer process. And I think that the country, based on the chart, is redefining itself. And it's all behind the scenes. And a lot of this takes place behind the scenes. A lot of 8th house stuff. A lot of, Gemini sort of, occulted and occluded intel with Mercury and Gemini. Look, I like Venus and Cancer here, but it's not really dependable. It offers a lot, but when it comes to adhering with agreements, no. You got a Venus Neptune square. Agreements are not adhered to. And it almost feels like, and again, I mean, we kind of know the lay of the land. Like you talk about APAC, and it's almost like they buy influence, like they buy relationships with Jupiter and the Venus opposition. To me, this is a very complex chart. Most of it is all about the outward expression of its own sort of divine right, divine will, and manifestation. All that Leo stuff in the 10th house. To me, that's the bulk of this chart. Right? We're going to rule this region, and nobody's going to tell us what to do because it's all fixed, right? This is all fixed. They're not moving off of the position. But when you have Uranus coming in here and it's squaring Mars and it's conjuncting the sun, things aren't what they seem to be. And again, if I could offer, like, if this country decided to hire me as an astrologer, I'd say you need to start striking equal deals here around the people in your environment, especially when it comes to land. You just strike an equal deal and you'll be fine. But I don't think that's going to get played out that way. What more can I say about this chart? So, I always ask myself, well, did they choose this time for the astrological potential for it? I think it's an interesting question to ask, especially with all that Leo in the 10th house. It's like, yeah, we're just going to dominate. We're going to dominate the region. We're going to be dominant. This is our our manifest destiny. And then the other thing that I think is interesting is what happens kind of in this occulted area of the 8th house. Like, there are things that are going on there that not everybody knows about, right? So it almost feels, slightly intentional in some ways. Slightly. And then Libra tends to be, hey, we're cool. Come on over. We've got, it's a cool place to be. We're cool people. We're friendly. We extend the olive branch. I mean, theoretically, right? I think the Libra rising is taking a bit of a hit. Just saying. If I was going to start a country, would I have this chart? I don't know. Maybe. If I wanted to be dominant and say it's my way or the highway, sure. This chart clearly exhibits those traits with all that Leo up there. The rest of the world is going to see your theoretical power. Saturn Pluto conjunction, that's fucking powerful. And it's going to square the sun and Chiron, and it's going to, be more important than just about anything else. Show of force and dominance, loyalty. Loyalty is a big deal, right? Like that was really in question this week. The United States isn't going to send any more of their smart bombs to Rafah. So the loyalty was being questioned there. Now, I've said this before. The most influential person connected to this chart is Donald Trump, because Israel's Mars and Donald Trump's Mars are roughly at the same degree. So Israel's Mars and Trump's Mars are both on his ascendant, and they are force multipliers, right? And then Israel's sun is on Donald Trump's midheaven, which is directing him as to what to do and his directions, or his kind of outward manifestation to the world out there. They're sitting right on top. So it's the two of these very important planets play major roles in the chart of Donald Trump, particularly Mars, force multiplier on the ascendant. All right. Keep your eyes. This is going to be an interesting week. A very interesting week. Just stay grounded. Stay grounded and be open to the possibility that you are more than you ever thought you were. Amidst all the creaks and the cracks and the groans and all the other worldly stuff that we have going on in our life. It's a big job, but somebody's got to do it. And I think you just got elected. All right, let's get out of here. Thanks for being here. As always, it's been a pleasure to spend my Sunday night with you. We'll be back on Tuesday with the Astro Weather. Don't forget locals. The link for locals is in the description box or the show notes. What else do we have? If you feel like buying me a cup of coffee, that's in there as well. Hit like, hit subscribe. And I thank you all for being here. and for all of your support and your kindness and your what would I call it? I would call it practical and healthy criticism, which I am always open to. And when it's valid, I listen to it and I try to improve upon whatever it is I need to do. All right, thanks. Take good care. Happy Mother's Day. Bye for now. God bless and good night.